right, we'll go ahead and get started. It seems like we really pissed off the projector in this room, so hopefully we'll have it fixed. I want to thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to welcome Laurie Hawkinson to K-State as our Ekdahl Lecturer. The Ekdahl Lecture was founded more than 35 years ago as a memorial honoring Topeka architect and university alumnus Oscar Ekdahl. The Ekdahl Lectures bring practitioners, teachers, critics, theorists, and artists to campus for interaction with students, faculty, and alumni. The lecture series focuses on issues affecting the quality of the physical environment and the leadership role played by the lecturers. I first became aware of the work of Laurie Hawkinson and Smith Miller and Hawkinson Architects when her partner, Henry Smith Miller, was a guest reviewer on one of my projects as a graduate student at the University of Virginia. He really liked my project, and as such, he was a really great critic. But seriously, I learned a great deal from his comments and was genuinely interested in what he had to say, and it was really fantastic. So I started to follow their work. And the reasons are really pretty simple when you look at it. If we think of architecture to be at one level an act of composition, Smith, Miller, and Hawkinson's broad range of works are acts of composing form and space from the scale of touch to the visual object in the landscape to the manifold fabric of the city. And always constant is what I will say is the beauty of that composition. They just look right. But what I found most compelling is the suborder of composition in their work, the detail of assemblage. There's a masterful bringing together of the many compositions of glass, steel, wood, concrete, surface, and fabric, all to come together with that same rightness. Our guest today received her Master of Fine Arts from the University of California, Berkeley, then attended the Whitney Independent Study Program in New York, and then received her professional degree in architecture from the Cooper Union. She is currently a professor of architecture at Columbia University and has been visiting adjunct professor at places like SCI-Arc, Harvard, and Yale, to name just a few. Laurie, as I mentioned earlier, is a partner in Smith, Miller, and Hawkinson Architects, a New York City-based design studio in architecture, urban design, installations, exhibitions, as well as objects and products. Across the U.S. and abroad, the firm has designed many award-winning public and private projects such as the Corning Museum of Glass, the Wall Street Ferry Terminal, to name just a few of the very long list of projects. For our third-year students, I think this is a very topical lecture because you're going to go to New York in a few weeks. So I hope you take a lot of notes for things to see. And with that, please welcome Laurie Hawkins.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. So it was great to walk around the school and see where you work and be jealous of how much more space you have here than we have at Columbia or even in our studios. So, you know, you guys are pretty lucky, I have to say. You have a very cool shop and all that. It's very, very neat. I enjoyed seeing it. And also enjoyed seeing what you're working on. So, I don't know if there was a title up. I'm titling this talk Moving Space. And I wanted to show a number of projects of very different scale and program. And these projects experiment with spatial ideas in a variety of formats. Our first commissions in New York City were installations, they were exhibitions, they were lofts in Lower Manhattan, as no one was really building anything at the time in the 80s, and there wasn't even a building boom, there wasn't even a burst bubble. There was really, you had a hard time going around and being able to point at something and say, you know, so-and-so did this. So, you know, we basically, anytime we got a design commission, we went for it. Tried to make something of it, for better or worse. I guess we can turn the lights off, might as well, at some point. You're going to bring them down a little bit? Yeah, okay. So these projects are tests for ideas, and so I wanted to talk about this idea of moving space. And as our programs we've been working with have become more and more diverse, our techniques and methods of working have changed and evolved significantly. So I'll describe some of these processes along as I show the projects. So I'm going to show a whole range from model apartment. I'm going to show Pier 11 ferry terminal. I'll show a little house, Max Min house, mixed-use building in Seoul, house in Sagaponack, then a large cultural project in North Carolina called Picture This, Corning Museum of Glass, an aquarium project, a project for a developer, I don't really call it housing. Let's call it housing for people who can really afford it. It's not really housing. A kind of theoretical project called the Farnsworth House, and 2 port of entries, Canopy and Zrega. So that's a lot. So I want to show kind of snippets of it, kind of all talking about this idea, if that's possible. So let's see if this holds together. So I want to use this idea of moving space in relationship to these projects and to use it as a lens, as I said, for looking into them and maybe as a way to kind of help frame and show what drives the ideas. So when you think about space, you might think about it as nothing. Right? You might think like there's nothing, space, there's nothing. So I always think of this, of Jerry Seinfeld's description of his TV series, right? When he says it's a TV show about nothing, right? Anybody ever heard that description of Seinfeld? No? It's about nothing, but somehow it fills the time. It's pretty funny, but it really fills up the space of that time. And you might think the same when you hear that you're going to hear a talk about moving space, that this is about moving nothing. So this slide, which is a view out in space, is showing you space, which of course doesn't move. So space lies waiting. Space lies waiting, right? I'm going to advance this. Bodies and objects move through space. So this is a view of the interior of the space shuttle moving through space. And I want to point out this kind of wild juxtaposition between this interior, this kind of wild juxtaposition between this interior, this compressed interior, and then this kind of vastness of space lying in very close proximity. So is that true, that space lies waiting, right? That it does nothing, that it just kind of sits there waiting? For this idea of moving space, I want you to consider space in a heightened and exaggerated sense. Space in which big and small things move. Space where events happen and where there's overlap. Space which is full, and it's also thick with possibilities. So this is a very extremely brief history of the representation of this concept, a graphic representation of this concept. So this is a very early drawing from 1350, how to represent moving space, right? So this incredibly simple drawing attempts to describe the changing qualities of a body graphically interpreted for the first time by Nicholas Orsami in 1350. The variation is shown by the verticals above a horizontal, so it's very simple, obviously, but significant in that it graphically represents movement for the first time. In the Renaissance, and again, I apologize for the brevity of this, space is formulated as partly optical, haptic, and partly the real thing. So very, very reductive here for the sake of time here. But and then in this representation of moving, is this a question, is this a representation of moving space? Where as a result of rotation, the molecules of water are displaced and held in a different spatial configuration as a result of movement. The diagram does exemplify a mathematical space that responds to thickness, dimension, form, and is reactive. So time, obviously time has entered into the equation here. So time can be obviously written or represented in different forms, a clock, a calendar, tidal charts. There are many different ways to show a tidal chart, a flow diagram. But considering space as well as time complicates things. Another space-time drawing, and this image was used by Siegfried Gideon in Mechanization Takes Command, you may recognize it, records the point of the rapier, right, the fencer that is illustrating a spatial, temporal, and intensity relationship. So the line weight here, right, because we architects, we think about line weight. I think about line weight. The line weight is indicating both intensity and depth, right? So when it's moving forward, you're getting this stronger thickness, this thickness of line. So you have the z-axis here now. Another space-time drawing to trace the more extensive movements here of kind of torturing this pigeon, this bird in flight. Marais harnessed a pigeon to record its trajectory and its path. So ideas or thought experiments, such as this concept of moving space, can take many forms or be played out in a variety of medium. Drawing, so we've seen examples of drawing here, film, performance, or architecture. So I always like to think that ideas kind of sit there. They don't just sit on a shelf. You take them, you do something with them, but they could be grabbed by a variety of medium. And so I'm going to try to, my medium is architecture, so here we go. This plan, similar to the pigeon or the rapier, is a drawing that attempts to describe the transformation of this wall as a response to urban life, both sleeping, eating, watching media in a small, very small New York City apartment where life moves through space and time. So this was a very early project we did. It's actually hand-drawn, that's why it's so funky-looking drawing here. But this bar, this diagonal, was meant to hold everything that you would need. You just need to come in with your suitcase, and there were kind of pegs for hanging things. This television, which is not even a flat screen at that time, would move through the space. The table would rotate. The bed would flap down. There were partitions that would move. But it was trying to do as much as it possibly could to be a kind of transformational object, accommodating life for one person in this very, very tiny, small New York City apartment. Additionally, this is a very small building in the countryside of Pennsylvania on the Delaware River. And for an urban couple, and I say that because they only wanted one front door, they were kind of terrified of the country. So you see the stairway going up the side, but it's all about this minimum dwelling, and we really built what was allowed in the UBC, the Uniform Building Code, just the minimum dwelling on this site that looks down at the Delaware River. And it's perched out to kind of be extremely greedy about the view and take in the view. But the funny thing about it, so this kind of movement up into the house, and then you're in there, and then you're kind of captive, and you look at the view. You've kind of come to the country, right? The back, we weren't allowed to call this a door because they were terrified that there would be an axe murder or somebody coming in, because they were in the country. The country was very scary. But so this was a window. And that's a side elevation, and very, trying to make this kind of very light, very, very light lifting house that just looks over to the view in the landscape, and just this one solid piece that anchors it at its base. As I said, we started our practice working in buildings, doing lofts. It was a long time before we actually got to do a footing in New York, or even got to do a footing. Doing a footing was an extremely exciting proposition. So this is a loft this is actually there was this guy called Murray Moss who had a store called Moss in New York, but we had this huge door that did, kind of all this kind of ballet in the loft and would open up and create different kinds of partitions, and he had a beautiful collection of glass, but kind of being able to make this kind of transformational piece in this space. But this is Pier 11, where some of you went, I think, and when you were in New York. I think you said you kind of huddled, but you couldn't go in the building. So this is a ferry building for New York City on a pier. We didn't get to do a foundation yet, right? This is on a pier. So it's just sitting there. But very, very tight site because you're on this pier, but because we're down in Wall Street, we wanted to we saw this as a really kind of important public space, actually, for Wall Street, because everything's so compressed down there. There's nowhere to escape, to go and kind of be outside and provide for different kinds of venues. So we clipped the building to the edge and then created this very long door. It's an airplane hangar door that we retrofit with a curtain wall that opens up and kind of invites the outside in. This very, very thin edge, between inside and outside, and you can tell this photograph looks different than the others. I want to kind of say, I'm going to kind of jump a little bit around about process and documentation and representation while I'm talking about moving space. But this is a photograph by Arietta Atali, who's an incredible photographer who photographed a number of our projects. But I mean, you're all seeing, obviously, these works through somebody else's eye, right? Because you're moving through architecture, somebody stops and takes a view of it. So she's showing this kind of very thin line between inside and outside, and it's a very wide shot. She shoots with a very wide angle lens. But that was something we were trying to achieve here. So here you can get a kind of overhead view where the building clips onto the edge and the remainder of it is left open. And then we anamorphically projected the words Pier 11 up and over the north facade of the building so that as the ferries come, because you could take a ferry from LaGuardia, actually, up here to this ferry, and you can know where you're going from a distance. But we thought of it as almost like an aircraft carrier. This is a view of an aircraft carrier, obviously, but this field, this flat field in which we wanted it to, when I was talking about space, to kind of lay waiting for something to happen, and then the building clips on and then opens up, which can spill out into that space. And there are many different ways in which people interact with this. They might go through it, they might pass by it, they might buy a ticket, they might not, they might just go out there, for some kind of have lunch or have their sandwich or something on the end of the pier. This is kind of showing the door. The door going back and forth, how it opens. This is in Korea, a project for Samsung, for the Schiller Group, and it was interesting going to the studio that's working on the skins, and you're working on the rain screen there. And this project is a double skin building, and we were actually proposing this out of titanium, working with Ova Arup, which is very, very strong, 10 times stronger than steel. It can be it's very, very light, very, very strong so that it doesn't deflect. And it creates a kind of second shell around this building that is on a very, very public street in Korea, Tehran Boulevard. And the building is really kind of a curious, crazy program, which is car showroom on the ground floor. Samsung was coming out with a car, and then it's displayed here. And then restaurants, and then a gym on the top. But this is a vertical garden in the southwest corner. But the reason it's closed is we were making, and you don't see windows, is that we were making spaces between this skin, which we perforated in places to create a sense of privacy, because there are like incredibly tall buildings around this glass buildings. And this in Korea, I mean, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, a lot of business takes place in restaurants, and a lot of transactions, so there's a kind of privacy and long meetings and things, so that's what this was all about, these kind of 3 different restaurants going on in here. And these are a series of study models in which we were looking at how this skin attaches itself where it does, and the whole project is actually hung from a core. There's one core, so there are really no columns, it's column-free, and it's hung from the core, the elevator core, service elevator, passenger elevator, and then the slabs being cantilevering out from that, so that we could get that kind of free space around and then having the skin. Just a collage view of it. And then this is where you get this sense of this kind of huge, there's this company called Pasco that is a glass fabrication building that's next door. I mean, consortium, I should say, but you can see it's a kind of a peanut, actually, in this neighborhood. And we called the building the turtle ship, so the shells are really more like, these skins are really more like a kind of turtle shell that hides something on the inside. And so if you think back to that first drawing of the rapier and this kind of movement, this drawing is a bird's eye view looking down, and the line weight is not good here, I would say, to critique our own drawing here that's been transferred to a slide. But there should be a difference between the thicknesses of material, right? I think there should be. But I like, this is the way I like to think of the building, that it's kind of making itself or unwinding itself and winding itself back. But that was the way we were thinking of it, as kind of space moving in and moving out, and both also in section and in plan, is that occurs. So now a residential project, this is that drawing I'm trying to kind of say that most here by superimposing this, that the majority of the space here is void. You know, this is a house. They're just kind of edge pieces here, and the majority of it is nothing, open. But it was a kind of funny commission for this guy who, it was a development actually out in East Hampton, and there was no client, but we just kind of thought of ourselves, ha ha ha. We didn't get to live there though, unfortunately. But so we wanted to, and there's no view at this house. There's really no view. It's almost like an urban, like that Schiller building, kind of looking in on itself. So they're on 1 acre sites, but it looks in. But it's a very lovely climate, and people go out there from the weekends, obviously from the city. So that entry piece, that entry space, which is here, we thought of as trying to be bigger than it needs to be, right? This kind of huge space that's incredibly generous, that sets up then that outdoor space, which is also indoor. But you actually slip in over here to go through the front door. So that's that opening. You kind of slip in here and go upstairs, living, bar. This is kind of bedrooms, guest, living. And then the exterior has that sense of those shells, like the Schiller building. We were working on these two projects at the same time, so I wanted to show these together. But it's about slipping into spaces and using materials to create this ambiguity between inside and outside. So here you really are outside, that's a gate, and then you go inside. This is a kind of outdoor cooking area and kitchen and fireplace, but and further back from that condition. And the bathroom, so indoor shower, outdoor shower, shower looking at mirror, looking outside, looking back at what's behind you. So we had an opportunity, I call it an opportunity. I told Javier I was going to say something about developers, but so I remember I remember Henry and I went to the Architectural League in New York, and Max Abramowitz, who, with Harrison Abramowitz, you know, they built all kinds of things like Lincoln Center, and he was like in his 80s, and he spoke, and I remembered him saying at this talk we went to, and was, you know, one thing you never do, never work for a developer, never work for a developer. So this is like, I don't know, the end of the 80s or something. Henry and I heard this, you know, and his mother was an architect. She was in school with Max Abramowitz. We thought, oh, never work for a developer. So this is kind of like ringing in our ears. And so we were approached by a developer to work. And our developer had gone to architecture school. So it was a little bit, that was good. But we were asked to work on a project that was in mid-block in Manhattan on 53rd Street. And it was a really interesting site because it was completely kind of trapped in the middle of the block, but it was close to the west side. So if you stuck your head out, we thought you could probably see the river. You could probably see the East River. You could probably move out into that space of the street. And this diagram shows we created, I can't believe he actually built it, because we made like 57 different, there are 83 units and 57 of them are different. So 57 of them are completely different. And there are maisonettes, there are duplexes, and there's a skip stop as you go vertical, so that the corridors are on every other floor. This is an animation that was made by D-Box of our project. So the developer made this to show what these different unit types look like. So you have maisonettes on the bottom, you have duplexes. I think this is very funny. So, but it just kind of shows the 4 different types of them, actually. There's kind of small little 1-bedrooms, and that's one that's right on the street. That's a 1-bedroom. But what I really want to talk about here is, so this is the street, right? And these are showing the different units. And the corridor, there are just 2 corridors here. right? And so that it goes over, that we're kind of doing that Corb trick of unité of going over and stealing space from the other side. And the maisonettes, there are 9 maisonettes where you can actually drive in. In New York, nobody ever has a car, but in this place there is a garage where you can drive in and come into your space and walk up, and there's a little courtyard in front. One of the things we argued for very hard in this project were these windows. You may wonder why, but windows are a big thing in a project like this. How they're made, how they're detailed, how they perform. And we wanted to use this window that was a projecting window, and it actually gives you more air circulation, because when you add up all of this air that can come in, it's greater than a tilt turn or a hopper. And we wanted to have this expression on the facade of when people are in, this expression of the facade moving in and out. So we won our battle of getting the window. They actually ordered them just before the whole economy crashed. So we were sailing at this point. We were into the end run of it. But here's one of the installations of that. And here's the project with just a few of the windows open, but these are the maisonettes, and then it steps back, and then there's a kind of tower piece here. And then this is this kind of what we were calling the bay window that can put you out into the street and gives you kind of steals, is very greedy about getting more space and looking on a slight diagonal down the street. Now, so the units, another thing in these units was we recessed. I mean, these all seem like very tiny things, but when you start, yeah, you guys probably built things already, but when you're building, how do you make that tiny space feel bigger than it is? Remember the house that was trying to be greedy about the view? So we recessed the trim, the mullion on the window, so that we get glass as high as possible into the edges. And we also, this is down here and up here, so you don't see the frame. It seems minor, but to us it was important. And we used angle glass down here, which is a frit that's in the glass that allows you, while you're looking down, you can look down, it depends what angle you're on, but people can't see up, right? So it was, the Japanese actually developed it for housing when there was housing units that were very close to each other, and maybe you wanted to look this way but not across. So the frit controls that. You may be familiar with that, but this is under construction. And this is the site. So there are some penthouses up here, and then the 9 maisonettes here, and anyway, and then these are the Zig units, and these are the smaller units. A project, a large cultural project that we worked on for the Corning Museum of Glass was actually in addition to the original Corning Museum of Glass, and this was to be this orientation center, and it was added on to the front of the museum up in Corning, New York, in upstate New York. And I realized when we first went up to the site to look at it, I realized when, you know, you try to keep your antenna up when you're going to look at something you guys are going to go to New York, you're going to look at your sites, you want to be really tuned and think about, you know, like take everything in, you have to trust your instincts. So when I realized that I was scanning the headquarters, the museum, I was looking everywhere, I was looking for glass because I wanted to somehow fulfill that, you know, desire I had, because I was coming to Corning to see glass, because they're all about glass. And when they first came to us to work for them, we did an exhibit first, and then we got this project. All I could think of were those blue flowers on those dishes, you know, that they used to have. They were just like hideous. And I thought, oh God, we got to get rid of those blue flowers, you know. But, you know, so time rolls on, and then we go up there, and I realized I was looking for glass. So I realized that this desire I wanted to somehow fulfill for the visitor, because, you know, this is for people who are usually coming there just once. And they come from all over the world. These tour buses come, and they go here, and then they go to Niagara Falls. And this is one of their stops on the way. So this is a big model we made of the entry. And we wanted to work with glass on edge rather than, you know, perpendicular, so that you're not looking through it like a window. We wanted you to be aware of its materiality. So we were going to have to bring you in through the edge of the glass, right, through the side of it. And we started working with this 3 degrees of tilt, and this is 3 degrees, and we were trying to reveal the edge. It's not easy to expose a double pane glass at its edge, if you think about it. Normally there's this hideous black goop on the edge, right? We can't have that, you know. We needed to see the glass on the edge, so that was a whole struggle. But we also wanted to extenuate this condition of moving into the space of where, and kind of create an ambiguity of whether you're inside or outside. When am I inside or outside? And we flip structure from outside to inside at times so the structure kind of moves as well. This is the space here where the structure outside over here, inside, and then, you know, this relationship between inside and outside is very critical, where there's a stone that's honed here, and then it's a rougher material out here, and then this is actually a concrete, it's almost like a piece of highway that the buses come and drop people, people can be dropped off right here and continue, so there's a whole section to this. And we wanted to bring the landscape right up to the building. We work with Nicholas Quinnell, the landscape architect, and this incredible rolling hillsides, and we wanted you to feel that in the building. And I think they put too many vitamins on these grasses because they just, like, they went crazy. They're on steroids, but I love how wild they look. And in the winter, they're golden and they're very pretty. But so this leaning glass, the idea is that you don't know if the glass is falling or righting itself, right? It's kind of leaning. So we want to create this moment of tension as you move through it. And then that detail, this is a vertical, this is at 90 degrees, this is a handrail. And then at some points, that handrail, that glass slides out, like maybe there's something down below we want you to see, so it tilts to 3 degrees. And we also, you know, this is handicap, right? Everything. 42 inches, but it's not very nice to have a handrail right at 42 inches. It's really not very nice. And so it doesn't feel very comfortable. And so we developed this piece that is lower, and then the glass plane goes above. And it also allows you to look down because there are things happening in section in this building. This is another one of those photographs by Arietta Atali, who I mentioned. And so this very, I love the grittiness of the photograph, but the structure on the outside, and then the glazing, and then the lighting, which is kind of inside and outside that uplights. And this, with those crazy grasses growing up. But I love how this photograph looks like kind of a ruin. It's so awful. I'm sure the corporation would hate this. But this is a space below that, below that here, which makes this kind of watery space where there's a cafe, and you can sit underneath here. There are tables out here when it's nice weather. And the ground comes down, and we had to link into a section of the existing building. This is an early sketch made, but here's this ground plane. This is when they look like hair transplants, the grasses, when we first put them in. But, and now they're kind of crazy wild, but we were meeting an existing elevation connection that had to be brought down there. When you enter this theater, so the whole thing was an experience. We worked with an exhibit designer. The first piece you were meant to go to was a digital theater that you went into. It's all very orchestrated. You walked around here. You came in, this was closed, right? There's a screen that comes down. And you see this film about glass, and then the screen goes up, and then you look back into the space that you had just come from. So I was always thinking of like Man with a Movie Camera, or, you know, where this apparatus of the film is exposed. And at one point, I have to tell these little war stories. At one point, this is just kind of like training for you guys, okay? They wanted to, believe it or not, the client wanted to save money. They wanted to remove this glass. They said they wanted to take it out. They go, oh, we got to remove it. Like value engineering, we got to take something out. They're going to take this out. And I was like, you can't take that out. Are you kidding me? You know, so This was stone. So I said, okay, this is what I'll do. I'll trade you stone for carpet, and I can get my glass. So we got the glass. But they were going to take it out. So this is a photograph of that same space by Judith Turner, who's photographed some of the work. And then they recently came back to us, and they want to make, this is again the digital theater, they wanted to transform it into a hot glass theater because they, you know, whatever, they wanted, you know, things change. They wanted, instead of the digital theater, so we're charged with cutting a hole in the side of our theater, the digital theater, and creating a whole new display in here where they blow glass instead of have the film. So it's like completely wild. There's a glass furnace here, and there's all kinds of apparatus in there, screens that, you know, digital screens that hang in there. And people can, so we cut into the side. We did surgery on our theater, and then people can watch from outside and also be in here. So that's pretty crazy. And this is the space that you look down into, where that landscape is, and there's a Chihuly sculpture, which is quite nice, that they hung it there. So this is a very crazy project that we did years ago with, was a collaboration with the artist Barbara Kruger, who works with pictures and words. I don't know if you know her work, and Nicholas Cornell, the landscape architect, and Guy Nordenson, structural engineer. And it was part of a larger site project, kind of master planning project competition that we won miraculously. And then the first piece of it was a 2-acre site next to this building. This is the State Museum in Raleigh by Edward Durrell Stone. And it's an outdoor amphitheater and outdoor cinema with these very large letters in the landscape. And we were just starting to, this is actually we have the honor of being on the cover of the Raleigh-Durham phone book. And so that is a photo from the Raleigh-Durham phone book. When people use phone books. But this was, I talked about how our processes and methods of working have changed. This was one of the very early projects that we did on AutoCAD and on the computer and in 3D Studio. So this is a very funky computer drawing, but it was incredibly helpful to put 80-foot letters that are in Helvetic extra bold italic and put them into a topography. I'm not sure, I mean, it would have taken a long time without that tool. I always say computers are very, very smart and they're very, very dumb. It was very helpful in this project. And the letters are seen, you know, from certain vantage points, but not always. And then this is the first animation. So this is a really old animation. The first animation we made in our studio. And we wanted to, because we wanted to show them how you would, obviously, when you do the fly-through tours, you wouldn't see the letters all the time, but you get a sense of the spaces, the amphitheater, the cinema. They could be operating separately or together, and then from certain vantage points, you'd see the letters. But we rendered the images. We rendered the project in transparency, so you're rendering them, both sides of something. So it was incredibly heavy. This file, it was like incredibly, believe it or not, it seems like nothing. I could probably do it on my phone, but we had to take like the whole CPU, like the hard drive out of our office and take it in a taxi down somewhere so they could put it like on a tape or something. It was completely nutty, but but it was very important, to be able to explain and understand the project for ourselves that way. And we made construction drawings of this. And these are the construction drawings, which I think are amusing. So this is the sheet that had picture this, and then there were sheets that just had, certain letters. There would be a sheet with just the PI on it. But the letters have other text within them. Barbara used texts from kind of historical references from writers from different references in the state, and they're made of different materials. Some are sand, some are asphalt, some are made of block-like walls. Some of the H goes up onto the amphitheater roof. The grass isn't growing in. This is the sand. The letter C is sand, so you can kind of sit on a beach of sand while you're watching a film at night, and the projection booth here looks this way. To be rather than to seem is the state motto for North Carolina, believe it or not. There's a wall. This is kind of funky, just under construction, that has all these phrases that start with the word please. There are texts set into the wall for people who are from North Carolina. John Maynard Keyes is from North Carolina, so these are all set into the concrete block. And then these elements that kind of sit there waiting to be engaged with and to be used in these different kinds of, almost like performance, whether you've got a bluegrass festival that happens here or a film. You can see like 3,000 people if there's a film going on. Here's a projection with the film. That's the wall. Please read the writing on the wall. Please don't do it to others. Please, please me. Please don't turn me inside out. So a whole number of words that started with the word please. And the opening. So, and this is in Coney Island. This is a project for the Coney Island Aquarium. It's a perimeter treatment for the Coney Island Aquarium, and it sits on the boardwalk on the Coney Island beach. This is a big whale balloon that we added. So this is the boardwalk, and we wanted, so it's a very kind of funny commission, which is to create a perimeter element that gives an identity to the aquarium, but also gives it a kind of security, but lets you know that it's there at the same time, and kind of sets up your experience for going into the aquarium. This is a very kind of unfortunate relationship right now. They just kind of sit next to each other. So we created this thing called the wave fence. We want to do something very simple, very inexpensive, with just wood. These are just pieces of wood, very simple. And they're painted with a photoluminescent paint. Okay, so all of the lighting on this is free. Nothing's plugged in. It's not LED. It's not emitting. It takes light from the sun during the day. We're at the beach. We're in a place we have great exposure, and then it emits it at night. And it changes its shape to lift up and show you. This is a festival that goes on Coney Island once a year, but show you kind of through periscopes and different things, or it could be a seating arrangement, a seating device, or a shading device, different interactions, let's say, with the aquarium. This is the real section of the aquarium. This is the seal tank, and so we said, well, what if we open it up? This is the boardwalk as it is, that space under the boardwalk. Other ways in which when this very simple device moves, it might expose, and creating kind of sections where you could go down and be closer to something, or look from above. And then there's the Cyclone Racer, the very famous, here it is, right? Incredible ride there at Coney Island. And we were creating parking structure in front of it with dunes above it. So you're kind of seeing these two in juxtaposition to each other. Here it is. So the wave fence, the dunes, the parking, the cyclone. And this is an animation of that. This is just paint on a board. This is Rushika, who made that section drawing in her office. But I'll show it to you again. So it's just, we turn the lights off, she's in a closet. So that's what happens. It looks just like that. And it's very cool. So we could get this glowing by just paint. And we worked with Linnea Tillett, a lighting designer, who brought this material to our attention. So we were very excited about it with this simple device. We could kind of create this reflectivity. So another kind of rude juxtaposition. So we did 2 projects for the federal government they were ports of entry. The federal government, GSA, General Services Administration, has this design excellence program where they hire design excellence. I don't know. They hire architects, I guess, to make them go crazy a little bit. But this is a drawing, an animation of the way we we saw this idea of crossing the border. It's not the border, it's actually a line perpendicular to it, which you move along. And can I do this again? Is that okay? Because we were talking. So, of course, you leave Canada, and then our port is in the US, but you always greet it from, that's where all the action is, moving from Canada to the US. So these are the things that you have to come in contact with, right? Your speed change, these are all these events that occur. You may not know it, then you cross the line. And the line, then there's the inspection station. There's, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings there, kind of a lot of asphalt, a lot of land. But it's a line that basically thickens as you move with your car. You most likely don't get out of your car. Hopefully you don't get out of your car. If you get out of your car, you're in trouble. So you don't want to be getting out of your car. I naively thought, you know, oh, it's like a visitor station. You know, we'd done Corning. Oh, you know, people are going to go and see our building. You know, you really do not want to get out of your car. You should not be getting out of your car. So this is what the working drawing looks like. This is a real project. This is a crazy, crazy project. So this is kind of the key drawing. There are a number of buildings here. You're organizing a lot of stuff. And there are a lot of canopies. There are a lot of canopies. So these are, we were doing, somehow we got 2 of these at one time. It was kind of crazy. So this is at Messina. Sometimes when you listen to the weather and you're in New York or somewhere and they say, well, it's 30 below in Messina, you know, this is it. This is like one of the coldest places on the US border, the northern border. And you actually go over, you're kind of coming from Montreal, and then this is a reservation. And then you come across, there's an Alcoa plant and a GM plant, so people they come across and were working here. A lot of the Native Americans actually that are living here, but there's a lot of trade going back and forth, and there's a lot of trade here at Champlain, which is a little further west. So the first thing, remember I talked about Corning, one of the things we realized, because you're moving towards this building, is that when you're going from Canada to the US and you greet the building is always in shadow, right? It faces north. It's never going to have sunlight. Look at this. This is the existing, we didn't do this, sorry. This is the existing building, Champlain. So it's forever in shadow. It's kind of a nightmare, you know, and it's really gloomy up there a lot of the year. So in both of the sites, we really wanted to figure out how we could get light, how we could somehow get as much light as possible, natural light. Can we get natural light onto this north facade? And can we get as much light as possible into these buildings? And by the way, these are essentially like police stations. And the officers in here would be very happy to just be sitting in a concrete bunker. So, okay. So that's kind of what you're working with. But, you know, the architects are the eternal optimists, right? We wanted to bring light in. You know, they're spending a lot of hours of the day in here, and so the quality of life is terrible. So we had this idea, and this is at Champlain, that we could, this is the north facade, and that we thought, what if we made a skylight that faced south? So just imagine that that's that thing you were just looking at, and that that light could come and bring light through that skin, you know, and then you'd get light emitting daylight, and then it would also come down into the space, down into the offices and into the waiting area if you happen to have to go in there, but there are people working in there. So this is that condition. This is the working drawing of that condition. Well, you know, we're showing them how high it is. This is ballistic glass, right? Because anywhere where you have clear glass, you have to have ballistic glass. This is channel glass, and then this is that skylight that brings light onto that facade, which is now channel glass. The lobby of that space. So here, this is the effect of that. This is the north facade, and this is the effect of bringing light out through that channel glass onto the north. So they let us build it. And we were, you know, there's so much land. I mean, there's just so much field of asphalt here. And we worked really hard in this project and in the Messina one I'll show to not have buildings sitting on curbs and sidewalks. And there's a tremendous amount of snow up here too. You You need to be able to manage it, but we also want to manage the relationship between the building to the landscape to the ground. This is a forensics lab that's looking out onto the booths, you know, where the officers are kind of checking people as they're coming in. And this is that, I think showed you that section of it, but this is an office, and so it's like it has blinders, but the blinders are light. So you steal light. This is a glass, right, kind of clerestory that's sharing, so I can steal more of that facade, both from my neighbor, and they let us build it. I always say you're kind of doing something over here, and then you're doing this over here, and they don't quite know, you know. That's what my office looked like. This is a secondary port. I think this is like really, this is the reality of the situation. But I wanted to show this because I mentioned that we did canopy. So there are these pieces in which I was talking about space moving. You're moving, very big things are moving through and under these pieces of architecture that we're building here. And we had an idea to make a kind of folded plate out of steel. Like, could we do a canopy that was just a single thickness of steel, that was just 5/8 inch thick and nothing else? And as a way of, you know, creating a span and also as a lighting fixture itself, because you have to have very, very high, you know, the amount of lumens on that surface are very, very high. It's higher than an office space because they have to look into your car, you know. I mean, all these crazy requirements that architects are given all the time. This is like hyper crazy. But it's, you know, at the same time, it's kind of fun because you have to solve this problem. So we developed these pieces. This is showing you the canopy at North Carolina. So supports are these steel angled, we call them kind of like walking man, so that they have this appearance of movement, that they're moving, like the canopy, something's moving through them or they're moving. So that's why we were tilting them, having them kind of express that. And these are the pieces that then get held together because they're tapered. And the canopy, huge concrete barriers here so that somebody doesn't like knock the whole thing over if some giant truck comes through. But this is that, it's folded, it's actually a welded plate. We'd made an earlier canopy for LaGuardia Airport years ago that was made of carbon fiber, super thin, made by boat builders, and glass. And it was assembled kind of like in 4 days. This whole, like, you know, 66 panels were put together in 4 days. So we kind of thought of how we could prefabricate this piece up in Champlain to come in kind of very large segments. This is the continental canopy. This is a hand drawing, you notice? And so this is the shell piece. It's a Nomex shell with carbon fiber laid over it and then sprayed white so it works as a light fixture. But then the glass piece, which is a triangle here. There's glass. That glass is working in compression and tension in this case. But here at Champlain, we're developing this folded section so that we can get strength out of it. And this is one of the sheets that shows, you know, these different kind of configurations, and this is actually for the work points for the steel fabricator. But you guys who are doing that, the skin studies, right, with the fluid dynamics. So here we're working with Arup, and we want to get a certain amount of depth in that folded section, but we can't have too much so that it fails. So obviously this is the one that is working, the geometry that worked. They were not bent, they were welded. And this is the size of them, something that can fit on a flatbed, and then they're just hoisted up into place and also welded together and on site. So at Messina, that other location, the coldest location, the other port of entry, there was a different kind of canopy where we wanted to make something that was as thin as possible at the edge, like this edge. Like, could we make this lead edge as thin as, like, paper thin, to kind of trick you to think that this thing is just so light, right, that you're moving under, and that it's also like this giant light fixture, and that we could uplight it and have it be a continuous surface rather than that folded plate, which was at Champlain. So the lighting sits in the asphalt here and shines up. The whole thing is kind of bondoed in sight. And this is that canopy. It's really wild. And this is called secondary, and you never, ever want to go to secondary, because this is where they take your car completely apart and they like leave it in this garage or something. So you never want to go to secondary. So primary is over here, is where you just wish through, you know, and then this is secondary. That's trouble, big trouble. But we got to make this very huge canopy. We wanted to make it obviously separate from there could be no windows in this building, believe me. But the canopy kind of sits there in front. And here's a section through it, so how we were achieving that. So there's this gutter, right? Got to deal with the water. And then it gets depth right in the center, so it gains depth. And this is the plan of that. And that here, we didn't have to put that big concrete piece above ground. We could bury it, right? So that the steel could come right out of the ground to create this very smooth condition. And there were, as I showed, uplightings in that. So you never feel that thickness, but it's there. Here they are in one of those days. That steel has got to feel like really terrible cold. But putting it together, and that's the canopy next to the facade. So this is now Messina. It's the different building. We use polycarbonate here on the facade. And another, I say we got to have two ideas. The second idea had to do with this system of the yellow through the site. And the yellow was, again, we did not want to have a curb. I mean, this all seems kind of crazy, maybe, like, why is this an idea for a piece of architecture? But we wanted to have these spaces that people walked on, that they moved on, that was safe, because this is all about vehicles. Remember, you don't want to be out of the car. So, you know, the officers or anybody who's walking out here, you really need to know where you need to be. And so we convinced them to just have the yellow, and that there wouldn't be a snow removal problem, because you could just, you know, go in here and you don't have the curb and everything. And then there's yellow. You know, the yellow is kind of a signal to where people could be. This is a detail of the facade where we're explaining to them that you can't be shot, basically. So you're behind a concrete wall. We can bring a lot of light into your building, but you know, you're not going to be shot. So this is a clerestory. This is facing north. It brings light in, and this is, I think this is an office or a conference room. And then up here again, and then a taller ceiling. But there's no way to look out, but you get a lot of natural light. Here's the construction view of that. It's a horizontal truss that this hangs off. And then we had these very large letters that go up and under. This is an interior view of that. So this is a horizontal truss that this polycarbonate is hanging on and then supported on the steel columns. The polycarbonate was a big battle. I'm telling all my war stories, but you know, you fight for these things. So we had to prove that I mean, they have polycarbonate, that's plastic, you know, that's like, you know, we want concrete block, but you can shoot, as if somebody's going to do this, a 2x4 at that with a bazooka, and nothing happens to it. It's very, very strong. It has a, this is me like selling the project, right? So, but it's true, it's true. So here's our diagram of the yellow. And, you know, it's a way that we were kind of signaling like this movement of moving up and through and in, and then the pedestrians move into some of these zones. This is where customs happen. This is a scanning building. This is that dreaded secondary building. So this is a diagram of all the yellow in the project. It's that yellow from the yield signs. This is everywhere it is in the building. You know, on the back wall, inside there's a little booth. And there it is. They built it. So that's the primary. This is that secondary canopy. This is customs, and this is a scanning building that I'm going to show you. So you're coming from Canada. And this is the polycarbonate that has different layers of translucency and transparency, kind of depending on what's going on behind it. This is course, ballistic glass. This is where the port director sits, and then these are also offices. So this is commercial, so it's a higher bay, but again, I wanted to show you this whole kind of field of the yellow that protects the building, protects the pedestrian, and leads you through the site. Here, you're coming out of the commercial, and this is also a loading dock, but these, like thinking of our handrails at Corning or the structure for the canopies, that we were trying to create something that had a kind of sense of movement, of direction with these handrails that are adjacent to the walkways. This is just kind of a warehouse building, really, where the customs officers are, but you go in and there's some rooms in here, but we wanted to bring that light in. And this is another view of it. I love, this is like something from some like crime scene photo, isn't it? It looks very ominous, but this is the building that is for scanning, and it's just about a truck moving into it, sitting in there being scanned, and they actually wanted to buy a prefab building and put it here, and we just said, you've got to be kidding. We can design this thing for the same price as the prefab, long story. Anyway, we were able to finally convince them to let us do it, and this is the building. The diagram of it is, this whole building is about a truck pulling into it, and a machine kind of moves along the side of it and scans the truck. So there has to be a concrete wall here so that somebody doesn't get irradiated, right? We want to bring natural light, and they didn't care about any natural light. We wanted to bring daylight in, and also daylight in at a lower level where people are kind of working and setting up the equipment. And then there's a tiny little room where the driver sits and when the truck's being scanned. So this is the structure. It's a kind of a cantilever from this side, right? This is that concrete block wall. This is a wall, and this side is propped so that light can come in, and then there's a kind of slot along this side. Here's the building. This is the little booth. It's yellow. This is where you go sit. There's a glass window so you can look at your truck and you know it's there. Feel good about that. And then there's a device that runs along here and scans. And then this is that clerestory that lets light in at a lower level. There's the big truck, the building all about one giant truck. That's all it's about. Crazy. And that's that clerestory. And this is kind of how we imagined the building, that it was just floating, right? This is because that's the side where the cantilever comes over. But it just floats and looks like it's just propped up there. But it's really just about a truck. Now, and then the facade is where we wanted to, you're coming from Canada, you're coming from the island, you're coming down the bridge, and we wanted to announce where you were, announce that you were like the Corning thing, where is the glass? There's this kind of anticipation, and a lot of, even if you don't have anything wrong with you and you don't have anything that you're smuggling in, there's always this apprehension about going up and crossing a border and talking to one of those officers. And so we wanted to make it very clear where the United States was. So we put these letters very large. We slipped them up underneath the facade behind the polycarbonate. And they're made of a actual reflective material like the yield signs, so that they reflect the headlights at night, and they kind of glow, and then you can see into the building, into some of the glass that occurs there. I hope this isn't too... This is a tiny little project I just wanted to kind of contrast something very small here. This is the Farnsworth. It's a theoretical project for the museum in Rockland, Maine, that said I'm just going to go through this very quickly, but I just wanted to show it kind of in contrast, something really small, but also working with new materials. It's for, if the director of the museum were to move into the town today, what would his house be? So they asked a number of architects to make a design. We made this elevated project. I wanted to show you some kind of studies of the process. We were looking at, this is a kind of family of forms. These are very ugly. We called these the hair dryers. We thought they were hideous, but we were trying to see how we could support this thing up and think about the structure and kind of elevating this building up, one house up in the air. We thought about how an elevator might bring them up, and thought about the roofscape on this. These are just a family of forms. Remember, there's just one house, so we're just studying these different forms. And an opening in the middle where you could have a courtyard. This is getting closer to a final version. There's a glass elevator this is about a family that goes away on the weekend, so they drive their car in, they pack it up, they go out on their boat, so they kind of take the car right up here, load it up, and then go out with their family. And this is a study of that roof, looking at how the columns would be received here at the underside of it and how that skin would come down. This is just kind of very quick. This is very kind of garish and ugly, and you can see where the trouble lies. The trouble lies in here. Like, how would we bring this down, right? How would we bring this down? And this is an outdoor space there, and this is kind of sealing it. Very crude models in our office trying to make this thing, and that's the final little study model we made. But just to see that space and be elevated above the ground in this little town, Rockland, off of the coast of Maine, the birch trees grow quite well. But the idea is that the roof could be occupied. These are sheep right here. It'd have to be some kind of railing. But your car sits there kind of ready to go, ready to take off. And this is the site plan. So the museum is here. This is the Farnsworth. And then this is the site they said, what if Mr. Farnsworth were to hear, because the museum was built at the turn of the century, what if he built it today? So the idea was that this open space is kind of contiguous with that, and all you see are the columns and then his car that goes up. And then finally, this is the last project. It's a small public project. It's really great to do public projects as a kind of way of giving back to the city. This is an EMS station in the Bronx. This is housing right here. This is our site. The river's over here, right, the East River. EMS is an emergency medical services building. It's very much like a fire station, but emergency vehicles sit there because this community is not near a hospital after 9/11. They commissioned a number of these buildings in neighborhoods that were, a certain distance away from the hospitals so that vehicles could get to them in emergencies. Here's a little building. It was just finished. We had a ribbon cutting just before Christmas. And it's a small little project that has a tremendous amount of stuff moving through it. It has these vehicles moving through it. It's really a kind of a machine, actually, that lies waiting for these vehicles. And this is just the lines of all the kind of traffic paths that go through it, and where the trucks go, where they go around. And also, we were very concerned with how the air flowed through the building. This is the drive through the airflow and the sun. And this is a view inside, but you can see it's like a giant apparatus where they're just grabbing the equipment, going out and down, and then there's another side where they kind of sit around and wait. There's a gym, and they're on shifts, obviously. They don't spend the night here, but they're on night shifts or what have you. And like the port projects, we wanted to bring natural light in, and we used a similar material, the polycarbonate. This is a very large truss because we were cantilevering at one point over. And so you're kind of seeing this scale, this little building that's trying to be much bigger than it is through its structure, and then opportunities for actually opening the window. So that's that cantilevered piece. This funny little guy who kind of homestead there. He'll be there forever. So that's the building. And its fifth facade is a roof, a green roof. We got first green roof for the fire department of the city of New York, and some photovoltaics. And then way back when, this was one of the first projects that I did. It's an installation with an artist and a performance artist. in Battery Park City before they built Battery Park City. This is the landfill. It was a beach program. It was called Art on the Beach. And we made this piece in which you were invited to walk up and speak out to the city. It's called Freedom of National Monument. Freedom of Expression National Monument. And there was a plaque right here inviting you to speak up. Well, this piece actually moved also. The whole piece moved years later and was part of a series of installations for the Public Art Fund when the Republican National Convention came to New York. I don't know why, but they did. And when it was reinstalled and we were asked to pick a site, the artists and performance artists and I, we picked Foley Square down in Lower Manhattan where all the courthouses were. And when we reinstalled it, we had to create handicap barriers for our freedom of expression piece. You can't see the ramp piece, but it also has barriers. But people would go up and they would scream like, I hate my boss and things like that back at the city. But anyway, thank you. Okay, that wasn't too long. Thank you.